So today, Israel are told to remind themselves of what God did just yesterday, the Passover. And the way that they're to do this is to consecrate the firstborn. So from now on, every time they have their firstborn son, they are to make a sacrifice to redeem that son. And when the son asks, well, what's this all about? Then they're to say, hey, well, actually, it's to remember what God did when he brought us out of power from Egypt. And that's a pattern that's going to continue throughout the Old Testament. So expect to see it again and again and again. This whole idea that Israel have to remind themselves of what God did when he rescued them from Egypt. And the reason they have to remind themselves over and over again, or at least they're told to, is because they forget over and over again. So already at the Red Sea, even though it's only a little while since God did the plagues, they've forgotten and they're panicking and they're distressed. They think, oh my word, what's going to happen? They can't conceive of the idea that God, who could bring them out with plagues, could actually deal with the Egyptian army. They can't get that into their heads. They forget so easily. And so do I, and so do you. When God's good to us, we rejoice for a few hours even, but then after that we start to doubt him again and we start to question. And the whole idea of consecrating your child, that was a really physical thing that they did to remind themselves of something that God did for them. And in the same way, we can, I think, adopt physical things that help remind us of God's faithfulness. I remember hearing a lady called Jo Saxton talking about how she has photo frames that are about an inch thick on her walls. And what she does, she puts them on the walls and they fill, as a family, they fill that little glass box with all the things they're thankful for that particular year. So they'll put a dollar bill in there because they're live in America, so that symbolizes God's provision. They might put an ultrasound of the baby that they've had that year in there. They might put a thank you card or something else. They'll fill it with all this stuff that just reminds them of the goodness of God to them as a family that year. And now they have a whole corridor lined with these boxes that show year after year after year of God's faithfulness. They can walk down that corridor every single day, and when times are tough, they can go and stand there, even with tears, and say, Lord, you were good to us before, be good to us again. Beth and I, in our own little way, we try and do this. So we have this thing here in our house. It wasn't my idea to have a heart, but Beth decided to have a heart. And then we put on here just Bible verses that have spoken to us, or things. This is a quote from Bear Grylls, which isn't obviously in the Bible, but we like it. We put that stuff on there, and every morning now when I come down the stairs, I read those verses, and they remind me of what God's been saying to us in the last few months. And if God says something else, particularly through a verse, I'll write that out, and I'll put that on there. What, for you, are the physical ways that you remind yourself of God being good? Because we will always forget. It's part of our nature, I suppose, to kind of drift. And then when we drift and we forget God's goodness and his power, that's not a good place to be in. So find a physical way, if you can, to remind yourself of God's goodness today.